We'll be continuing with the section on voiceover recording tips, this time showing you how to easily and quickly reposition and align multiple items in a track in order to space those items out by a specific number of seconds. In the last lesson, we started learning about some cool time-saving voiceover recording tips. You learned how to split an audio item manually using the S key on your keyboard, and how to trim an item manually by clicking and dragging the edge of an item to the left or right. But then you learned how to do this much faster by using the Auto Trim Split tool, which does both of those things, splitting and trimming, automatically with a single click. Now we're going to talk about another tool that'll also save a lot of time and effort, the Reposition Items tool, which allows you to insert a set number of seconds between every audio item so you can space them out evenly. Okay, so go ahead and open Reaper. I recorded in the last lesson just 4 quick phrases, and then we manually trimmed and split them. Then with the Auto Trim Split tool, we split one long audio item that had all 4 of these phrases in it into 4 short audio items and trimmed them all in one click. Today we're going to talk about how you put a specified amount of time, say 3 seconds, in between every single one of your items. When you have 4, it's easy enough just to drag them like we did in that last lesson. But if you have 50 to 75 or 100 of them, obviously that method would get very tiresome and take a really long time. This method will show you how to do it in a heartbeat. We'll also revisit the ripple editing tool, which allows you to move multiple items at once. So, ripple editing. Over here you'll see the button for ripple editing. Right now it's disabled, it's not lit up. If I click on it one time, you'll see that I have activated ripple editing per track. So that means that everything on one track will be affected, but things on other tracks won't be affected. If I click on it again, I now have enabled ripple editing for all tracks. And that means moving one item in one track will move all items on all tracks along with it. For now, let's click on it again to turn it off. Click on it one more time to enable it for ripple editing per track. Here's a quick reminder of what ripple editing does. With ripple editing off, if I move this item, it moves all by itself and the other items are unaffected. If I click on it once to enable it, just by clicking on the first item and shifting it to the left or right, you can see that everything to the right is also shifted by the same amount. This is really cool, but let me issue this warning right up front. You need to be very careful that you know when ripple editing is on and when it's off. This is especially true when you have several minutes of audio in your project. Right now, with just these 4, any changes you make, say to this first one, are going to be pretty obvious when you can see all the items. You'd notice. But if you're zoomed into it, or if you have a whole bunch more downstream off the screen, let's zoom into this one and everything that's downstream is out of sight, out of mind. So let's say that everything is right where it needs to be on the timeline. This starts at 6 seconds and this starts at second 12, and that's where it needs to be. But you decide to come over to this item over here and say you want more or less blank space in between those 2 pieces there. So let's just go ahead and do that. We make a split and we want to trim it up a little bit. Now maybe shift this forward in time so that we can increase the space. Well, guess what? If ripple editing is on and you've forgotten about it, the changes you make on that first item will shift everything downstream. You may zoom out to find that everything's all messed up because you forgot to turn ripple editing off. That is what the undo button is for. But just always remember to turn ripple editing off when you're done with it. That should help. So let's go ahead and undo those changes I made. One other thing that you need to be aware of is that ripple editing affects whatever item you're working on and everything to the right of it. That is, everything that happens later than that item. But it will not affect anything that happens earlier than that item. So that's why when I click on the first item and shift it back and forth with ripple editing turned on, all 4 items move. But if I come over to the second item and shift it around, only it and the 2 items downstream from it will move. The one earlier than it will not be affected. Same here. If I move to the third item, only it and this one will be affected. Now remember when I talked about the different settings here? We have ripple editing for all tracks versus ripple editing per track. When you only have one track, they're both the same. But let's go ahead and add a track here. Remember, if you just double-click in this blank space, it opens up a new track. That's what I did here. I added the second track, and I'm just going to bring these two items down to the second track. All right, so let's turn ripple editing off. Now, if we press it once, it's per track. So let's see how that works. You see, I move that back and forth, and it affects everything on track 1, but nothing on track 2 is affected. If I click it one more time and enable it for all tracks, you see now that moving this first one affects all items on all tracks. Okay, so I think you get the idea about ripple editing. Now we're ready to talk about the Reposition Items tool. But unlike previous tools, this one isn't part of Reaper when you get it. You have to go and get an extension pack for Reaper, which is also free, so don't worry about that. The first thing you have to do, though, is close Reaper so that you can install this. Where you get this pack is at a site called www.sws-extension.org. This is actually the site of one of the moderators at the Reaper forum, which, by the way, I highly recommend visiting and joining. This is where, when I was first learning Reaper, I had all my questions answered. This is an extremely active forum. But anyway, to get to the SWS extension, all you need to do is download this executable file. This is a trustworthy file. I've done this many times. So you just click on the download link here and save the file to your computer. And once you save it, go ahead and execute that file, and it will install the extension pack for you. So then what you'll have when you open Reaper back up is this addition to your menu bar. But also, you'll have more actions available to you, more tools available to you in the Actions toolbar. So the action that we're looking for is called the Reposition Items tool. And if you go to the action list and just type in Reposition, you'll see that you get 2 hits. The first one is a tool that comes with Reaper. That's not the one we want. What we want is Xenakios's SWS Reposition Selected Items, since the way this works is to put a specified amount of time between items. And right now we only have one selected. So let's go ahead and close this. And let's select these 2 items. Just right mouse click on the first one and then drag that lasso across the second one to select them both. And now go to Actions and type in Reposition and choose Reposition Selected Items and choose Run. Now you have a couple of choices to make here. Add time interval 2 and click Item End. That will put the selected number of seconds onto the end of each item. So if you leave it at 1 second and click OK, you see what happened up here? It put 1 second in between those 2 selected items. Let's run it again and put 3 seconds in between. Just type a 3 in there. Boom. That puts 3 seconds in between those. Now let's go ahead and select all 4 of these. So just right mouse click and hold it down and drag that lasso across all 4 items to select all 4. And let's go ahead and run this again. And we'll leave 3 in there and click OK. See how it aligns those 4 items? It puts exactly 3 seconds in between each. This was a huge time saver. It was kind of a lifesaver, actually, for me, for a particular recurring voiceover job that I had. Now, as with the Auto Trim Split tool, it's helpful to have shortcuts on your keyboard for some of those tools that you use often. I use Control-Q for this one. You can use whatever you want. But again, with this selected, let's come down here and click Add. And go ahead and type your keyboard shortcut. I'm going to click Control-Q and click OK. And it's going to say there's already some other thing already on that keyboard shortcut. And I don't use that very much, so I'm just going to click OK and overwrite that. And now Control-Q will activate my Reposition Selected Items tool. So let's close that. Let's go ahead and mess up the timing in between all these. Then select them all again. This time I hit Control-Q. That brings up Reposition Items. 3 is already in there. Done. Awesome, huh? In the next lesson, we'll see how to save each item as its own separate file. So I'll see you then.